event. Typically, we would do this in person, but unfortunately, due to circumstances that we're all very aware, we are going to bring this to you virtually. And we feel like we're having a little bit more of an increased participation with this because it's easier to jump on a Zoom and manage the challenges of being a candidate in this this crazy time. So I want to thank everybody. I mean, we're honored to have all of our candidates with us today and all of you who are coming to check this out. State and municipal elections are the lifeblood of this country and affect citizens far more than national elections. Yet when it comes time for elections, most people don't bother to be educated on who their candidates are, and they continue to complain about how government is failing them. Many too easily forget, in the end, it's the small things that matter. The major concepts are easy to teach, but if the details aren't taken care of, the product will suffer. Think of your local elections that way. They are the details, the small things that make your car shine or a machine run. The problem is we're so concerned with the big and splashy events that we forget what really counts and is in front of us on a daily basis. So we truly appreciate everybody that has taken the time to be with us this morning to educate themselves on the candidates that are making these crucial decisions for us every day. So I want to thank our sponsors. We have overarching government affairs sponsors that are also part of this event. We have Energy Transfer, Bars, Gowie, Amen, and Pulse, Comcast, Aqua America, AmeriHealth Caritas, Brinker Simpson, Crozier Health, LPL Financial, Meridian Bank, Trinity Health, PICO, and Republic Bank. Now at this point, I would like to introduce Ed Kelly, who is on our CPAC board. Ed?
Thank you, Trish. I'd also like to echo those sentiments and thank everybody for the candidates for participating, as well as the attendees that are tuning in. You know, again, as Trish said, we all know this is an unusual year, and as a member of the CPAC board, it's always an enjoyable process having all the candidates come in at times, you know, to meet with them and as we go through, you know, an endorsement process. And obviously this year we weren't able to do that. So, you know, this is the next best thing. Just want to go over an overview of the agenda and the format that we're going to have. We're going to break this down by each particular race from, you know, Senate district, State House district, as well as Congress. We're going to have each candidate's going to have 2.5 minutes to speak, followed by 5 minutes of Q&A that's going to be facilitated by Trish. For the candidates, you will be reminded via chat when you have 30 seconds remaining for your initial 2.5 minute time to speak. Now, attendees are also asked to submit questions via the chat function, but we'd ask that you keep the questions professional, polite, and on topics of interest to the chamber community as a whole. So again, welcome everyone, and looking forward to hearing all the candidates and what they have to say.
Thank you, Ed. We have Congresswoman Scanlon, who is with us this morning. So Mary Gay, would you like to go first? I know that Dasha Pruitt had a previously scheduled event that she wasn't able to be with us. So I'll offer you the 2.5 minutes now if you'd like to take it.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you to CPAC and all of its members for inviting me to join you today. I'm very, very grateful for your support and advice during my first term in Congress. While I worked for a commercial law firm before coming to Congress, my focus had not been as much on the business world. So it's been really helpful to have support from this community. So I make sure that I'm addressing your needs. We've had some real nice successes this term. Just as the COVID crisis was hitting, we had two pieces of good news. First was making sure that we got federal authorization and funding to keep the Chinook program at Boeing. That saved 4,600 jobs for our region. I got a crash course in defense procurement, but it was all about working together with our regional delegation, identifying the folks that we needed to work with in Congress on appropriations and armed forces committees. to make sure we got the language in the bills. You know, I had to testify at certain hearings, and then we spread out from there and made sure that we contacted members of Congress in the supply chain across 38 states so that we got their support as well. Second, we were able to secure a $680 million contract for the shipyard, which again has ripple effects throughout the region. It's 5 years of security for a yard that had gone dormant right as I came into office. Again, that was a long fight with a lot of bipartisan support, and you know, going so far as I buttonholed Elaine Chao in an elevator one day to talk about why the Philadelphia shipyard needed to build these maritime training vessels as opposed to one of the other 5 we were competing against. So those were great victories. Wouldn't have happened without dozens of groups pulling together. They involved larger employers, but obviously we have a lot of small businesses throughout the region. And I've really appreciated the opportunity to get out there and meet with them, whether it's lawn care contractors who have concerns about getting visas for their workforce, or you know, defense contractors, small ones that work along the river, restaurants, which obviously have been seriously impacted. You know, we have the whole range of economic drivers here in this district. We've also worked closely with state and local government. We convened a meeting for them in February, all our local municipalities, so that they knew what we could offer from the federal level, and our colleges. There are 17 colleges here in the 5th Congressional District. I visited all of them. We convened them regularly to see what they need, both to support our workforce and as businesses, because they employ a huge number of people in our district. Obviously, we're now faced with COVID. A lot has changed. It's not going anywhere, but we're trying to make sure through Congress that our businesses have the resources they need to support their businesses and their employees. You know, to repeatedly make the case that we need more stimulus. The head of the Fed agrees. So we're trying to push that through. When we pushed through the initial PPP program, clearly it was not targeting our small businesses correctly. So we made tweaks in the second round that came through, and there are further tweaks that are proposed for both that have been voted on in the House in both the HEROES Act and HEROES 2. We're trying to push forward with that in the negotiations for the next round that goes through. I think there are a lot of opportunities in supply chain. We've seen that. The Branscombe factory that really got up and running at the start of COVID, and you know, had their employees in bed in the factory to produce the raw material needed to create PPE, the personal protective equipment. I'd like to see more opportunities for our region in terms of manufacturing what we need in order to get through the pandemic. And we certainly are seeing a lot of progress on the healthcare end. A lot of our universities are involved in research and testing. But I think there's opportunities for the business world as well. We did see early on in the first days of the pandemic, when nobody could get hand sanitizer, I reached out to the American Distilleries, nonprofit umbrella group, was able to connect with the Pennsylvania distillers and worked with them to overcome federal regulations that were preventing our local distillers from making hand sanitizer. We were successful in doing that. And eventually they got a contract with our local postal services and to produce sanitizer, which then kept our distillery employees in work. So at any rate, happy to be here, you know, totally committed to the fact that a big part of my job is making sure that our business community is able to thrive, because then we all thrive. So if there's anything we can help in my office to help you as we move forward, please reach out, and I'd love to come visit your places of work. That's a big part of what I do. So thank you.
Mary Gay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Can you just, small businesses are our lifeblood of the economy, but right now, particularly with all of the funding issues, mass transit and infrastructure needs to be funded. Are there any efforts to support infrastructure needs with CARES packages in the future?
Sure. There has been money included for mass transit. There was some in CARES, and there's also some in HEROES. I think that the legislature, I think across the country, people are very hungry for an infrastructure bill, and that's something that predated the COVID pandemic. I think it's probably one of our best paths out of it economically is to do a large infrastructure bill, both so we can address many of these infrastructure issues that are costing us business to begin with, but also because that way we're investing in jobs that are going to help get our economy back up and running.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to our next race, but I really, truly appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning so people can learn a little bit more about what's happening.
Okay, if people have questions, please feel free to reach out to my office. The phone is 610-626-2020, or you can go to scanlon.house.gov and send a message through the email portal there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate you taking time this morning.
Happy to do it. Thank you.
So now we're going to move over to our Senate, 17th Senate District, where we have an open seat. We have Amanda Cappelletti and Ellen Fisher. So we're going to have, Amanda, I said that wrong. So Amanda, we're going to have you go first. You get 2.5 minutes, and I will send you a message in the chat when you have 30 seconds left. Then we'll go to Ellen, and then we'll do Q&A. Okay. So Amanda, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Trish, and thank you, CPAC, for having us today and putting this together. It's a shame we can't be in person, but it's still nice to be able to interact with all of you. As Trish said, I am Amanda Cappelletti. I am the Democratic nominee for State Senate in District 17. I'm an attorney with my Master's of Public Health. I am currently the Vice Chair of the East Norton Board of Supervisors, and I have a lot of experience in Harrisburg from working with Representative Donna Bullock, the ACLU of Pennsylvania, and working as the Director of Policy for Planned Parenthood. I say that to you not to give you a resume, but to let you know that I know how Harrisburg works. I know how it doesn't work. And right now it's not working for many of us on this call. Not sure how many of you know, but Pennsylvania received billions of dollars in federal aid money to help address the pandemic and make sure that small businesses and families have what they need to be able to be resilient through the recovery. About $1.3 billion of that money was put into an account that is allowed for the General Assembly to appropriate as they deem fit. Now, because of our Republican leadership right now in Harrisburg is incredibly focused on suing the governor and suing the state of Pennsylvania on a variety of different ways, instead of focusing on our pandemic and figuring out how we support economic recovery, that $1.3 billion continues to sit in that account instead of being appropriated and given out to everyday working families and small businesses in the way that it was meant to be. And the important piece to know about that is if that money is not used by a certain time, the end of the year, we have to give it back. So what we need is to see is real change in Harrisburg and leadership that's focused on the everyday family and small businesses to make sure that we're succeeding and that money gets doled out in a way that is fair and equitable and supports small businesses and families every day. I can say that as somebody that comes from a family of small businesses. My brother and sister-in-law own a small business in Montgomery County, as do some of my uncles and my aunts within my family, all small business owners, all struggling right now, just like many of you, to figure out how to move through this pandemic and continue to have that money to have money to support their business, the people that they employ, and their own families and the families of their employees. So I'm here today to let you know that I know that Harrisburg isn't working for you and that we need to have leadership in Harrisburg that is focused on using that money and focused on doing what we need to do to support Pennsylvanians and families. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Amanda. Ellen, good morning. How are you? Hold on. Can you unmute? I'm sorry. There we go. All set. You ready to go?
I'm ready.
Thank you.
Every day I get in this unmute piece. It's pretty funny. Anyway, thank you so much for hosting this today. It's great that so many of the candidates could be with us. I think that says a lot to what you're doing at the chamber. Some of you know me. I've been a member of the Delaware County Chamber and Mainline Chamber, Philadelphia Chamber for so many years. I am also the executive director of the Young Entrepreneurs Academy, founder of the Women's Yellow Pages, and the Women's Business Development Center in Philadelphia. I've spent my life working around small businesses, advocating for them, marketing their products, and now helping the next generation of new entrepreneurs develop their skills. I think this is a critical time in the state of Pennsylvania, but certainly in our area, to help businesses get back on their feet. I would say that the 3 top priorities for me running for office is obviously advocating for small businesses, making sure that they reopen. Why it's not working for all of us is because we've been shut down unnecessarily to some extent. We have not gotten help from the state on how to reopen safely. And I would propose an 18-month moratorium on new regulations. All of the businesses I'm talking to day after day when I walk around the district, they keep talking about all of the changes, and it's really hard for them to just keep up with the new things. And there are things I believe the state could do to help all businesses, like we have a lot of medical officers and retired medical officers, and couldn't we give them some advice? People that don't have the resources or would never have the resources to have a chief medical officer, be able to call the state and ask for help in how to open their spaces safely for their employees as well as their customers. I believe that we can trust employers to want to keep their customers and their employees safe. There's an inherent need to have all of those things working at the same time. I also think education is a key issue in this race, and that is building work-ready skills for our next generation. Thank you.
Ellen, thank you so much. I know that time goes so fast, so I appreciate you. This is a little bit unique. Typically, we're in front of the candidates with these big red and yellow cards that say like time's up, and we're in their face about it. So now it's a little bit challenging. So as we're watching, they're talking, they're looking at their notes, and then they're looking at the chat for alerts from Alex or I about the timing. So we appreciate everybody's flexibility as we're working through these technical things that we have today. So Amanda, you talked about having a lot of family members as small business owners.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about what you would do to help small businesses, especially now? And would you support CARES funding for economic development here in this region?
Right. So absolutely, I would support that. Like I said, there's $1.3 billion left of the CARES Act money that the legislature, the General Assembly just hasn't moved on. And I would fully support that coming into the southeast of Pennsylvania, specifically Delaware and Montgomery counties, as our district covers. But I think the other piece to know is we need to also look at kind of what the red tape is. One of the things I've heard from small business owners is that they just don't have the time to comply with all of the nitty-gritty little details to apply for the grant funding. It's just that in and of itself is a whole other job. And we need to better streamline these processes to make sure that small businesses are readily able to access this funding. And from my understanding, Delaware County and their program that they did a really great job of creating a streamlined process that made it easy for small businesses to be able to access that money. So I think we as the state need to look at that and say, what can we do better? How can we better streamline this and ensure that our small business owners can more readily access this money, as opposed to being focused on the red tape and the nitty gritty little, details. Did they check this box, that box, or the other?
Great, Amanda, thank you so much. Ellen, similar question. I know that you have been out, everybody's been out talking to people. Can you talk a little bit about what you're hearing from the residents that you're talking to, or business owners particularly, and how you would address those needs? How would you help the small businesses kind of get through what's happening right now?
So it's interesting. I have probably been to around 4,500 doors at this point, and I'm always stopping at businesses as well. What I'm hearing is it's really interesting. I'm sure it would have been different last year if you were running for office, but now when you knock on somebody's door, whether it's a business or a homeowner, the first thing out of their mouth is getting people back to work. So that is that changes everything. So I would say that sometimes it's getting the kids back in school, and it depends on whether they get emails from their school district or not at that point that day, but it's generally getting the economy back working. What they have said, what the business owners have said to me is that they struggle with all of the changes. It seems like every week there is a new mandate from the governor as to whether you can open or not open. The other thing they've been particularly struggling with is the fact that it seems arbitrary which businesses have been shut down, and the appeal process to actually get open again and available has been really difficult to almost non-existent. So I'm concerned about whether they're actually going to be able to really reopen. It doesn't seem like it's based necessarily all on science, these decisions.
Okay, thank you. And just one more question for both of you. I'll give you a little bit of time to talk about. I know that we're very focused on what's happening now in the pandemic, but we can't lose sight of the fact that infrastructure is so important, especially here in our region. We're densely populated. How would you support infrastructure needs and mass transit? Ellen, do you want to start and then we'll go to Amanda?
Sure. So infrastructure is really important. It's not particularly sexy in how we address this, but it is important. For instance, 90,000 Pennsylvanians didn't get their unemployment insurance because we hadn't updated our software in the state. It wasn't just because so many people were applying. They were using software that was used in the 80s. And it was hard to find people to actually update it. So we're in technological debt. The other thing that is important is we have a lot of bridges in the area that have not been repaired. So it not only affects our residents getting in and out of their homes and to their homes, but it affects businesses because they can't get around quickly. They can't get their supplies in. And the big funding issue is going to be around whether we can get our businesses up and running and profitable again. And right now we're between $5 and $6 billion down in revenue. So where are we going to get that? And there's a lot of different conversations about where that's going to come from. But the biggest way is for us to get back working.
Great, thank you. Amanda, we will give you the time and then we will end the 17th senatorial district race. So Amanda, feel free, if you can answer the question, then we're going to move along. Ellen, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So I think when we're talking about infrastructure, that is definitely a piece that's really important to me because of I personally use a lot of public transit when I'm going in and out of the city. We know that our roads and our bridges are in disrepair all over the state. It's been decades, hundreds of years, 100 years in some places since some of these things have really been fully repaired and updated. So what I think we need to really start looking at is going through our budget with a fine-tooth comb, knowing that, the money that comes through our tolls in our turnpike system largely goes to support the state police. And instead of going right back into updating our infrastructure. And I think looking at that and how do we support our state police system in a different way that maybe we can still reinvest into our bridges and our roads and hopefully also public transportation. I know that public transportation is a big deal here in the Southeast, and as we get further out into central Pennsylvania and even a little bit of Western Pennsylvania, it's not perhaps as big of a deal because they don't readily use or access those things. So we really have to figure out how we can support that and get other parts of the state on board with improving and expanding our public transportation system. So I think it's going to be a teamwork effort where we're reaching across the aisle to connect with people who maybe don't have as much of an investment in something like our public transit system, while also looking at where our funds are going, that, you know, from our tolls on the turnpike to how we're supporting our state police system, and figuring out where all of that money should be going versus where it is going, and really being fiscally responsible about what's happening with the dollars.
Great, thank you. Ellen, Amanda, we truly appreciate you taking the time this morning. We know this is an open seat, so we wish you both the best of luck, and we'll be seeing you both in the near future. Thank you. So now we're going to move.
Thank you, Trish.
Thank you. So now we're going to move to the 9th Senate District. We have our Senator Tom Killion with us this morning. John Kane wasn't able to be on this because of schedule conflicts. So Tom, we want to welcome you. If you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what's happening.
There we go. Hey, Trish, thank you. And so pleased to be here. I want to thank CPAC for putting this together, as you do each and every year, normally, obviously, in person. As you know, I am running for the 9th Senatorial District, which includes 20 municipalities in Delaware County and 11 municipalities in Chester County. Small business owner myself. I've been actively involved in Harrisburg as we try to address the situation with COVID-19 and the devastating effects it's had on our economy here in the Southeast. I'm in a unique position because I am chairman of the Community Economic Recreation Development Committee, which is a mouthful. But what it is, it oversees tourism, gaming, and economic development. And I've been the lead voice in Harrisburg, one of the leading voices in Harrisburg, for reopening the economy correctly, safely. I see no reason why we can have Walmart, Target, pardon me? I could see no reason why we have Walmart, Target, Home Depot open safely, but a lot of our mom and pop family-owned businesses can't be open. That's one of my top priorities. As you know, normally we'd be done right now. The session would be over, but it's not. We have to go back on November 10th to complete the budget. We passed the 5-month budget. We have to go back and get the rest of it done. I am pleased to say that in meetings with Treasury and the Appropriations Committee, which I sit on, we think we can do that and fund at last year's levels without raising taxes. But I have several other priorities, many other priorities before we go back. One is that we had a hiccup last week. I have Dina's Law, Senate Bill 773, named for Dina Ekman, who was tragically killed by a 6-time DUI offender. This legislation will require that if you have 3 or more DUIs with a high BAC, blood alcohol level, you have to wear what's called a CAM bracelet, which will measure your sweat, and we will know whether or not you've been drinking, and we can get you off the streets. That bill is a top priority. I spoke this week with the Speaker of the House, a former colleague of mine, and the Majority Leader, former colleague of mine, and they promised me when we get back on the 10th, we can get that across the finish line. One other bill, we're talking about small business and the effects of COVID. In June, we estimated that we had approximately 900,000 people whose utilities are going to be shut off. And the PUC just granted as of November 9th that utilities can be shut off. And that number now has to be over 1 million. We heard earlier about the CARES money and that we're not working together to get that out. We are. Senator Art Haywood and I got $175 million in CARES money, and he's a Democrat from Philadelphia, for rental and mortgage assistance for small business and homeowners. Matter of fact, Art and I elbowed each other on the Senate floor. We got that done. The two of us are currently working and have worked closely with PICO and Chester Water Authority to deal with the issue of these shutoffs. And I am convinced that when we go back, we will be able to fund the money to prevent these shutoffs out of the CARES money. And that's a win-win for everyone. That's a win-win because if we don't use the federal money, the utilities can go before the PUC and have a rate increase, which all of us will pay. So those two things, amongst other things, are my top priorities. I want to thank you for putting this together. I had the pleasure of working closely with the Chambers of Commerce and CPAC over a number of years. You do fantastic work on your advocacy for small business, and I'm looking forward for that to continue.
Thank you. And we appreciate your leadership, especially through this pandemic, and making sure that the businesses were educated on what was happening, and then also to kind of find out what struggles the businesses were having to take that back to Harrisburg with you. One of the questions in the chat that we just had a statement was more that the 1.3 billion held by the legislator for the CARES money was hopefully reserved for the budget deficit rather than increasing taxes. Can you talk a little bit about that? Do you have any thoughts on how you would handle that?
Actually, we can't use the CARES money to fill in holes that in the budget. It has to be allocated for things that are harming our community that are caused by COVID-19. That's why we aren't done yet. That's why it hasn't been completed. Our hospitals need money. Small businesses need money. I talked about utilities that need money. We want to try to fund daycare some more. And right now we're struggling in a bipartisan basis. I'm talking to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle so that when we get back, we can figure out how to divide that 1.3 billion we have left. Because frankly, it's not enough. So we're going to need to make some tough decisions. But as I mentioned a moment ago, we are fairly certain that we can get through this budget, fund at last year's levels without increasing taxes. As you know, the budget we passed, the 5-month budget we already passed, provided full 12-month funding actually for education, debt service, and our retirement for our retirees. But we have 7 months to go for the rest, and we believe we can fully fund at last year's level without a tax increase, which is extremely important to the business community right now, given what they're going through.
Great, Tom, and we have time for one more question. And we had our Senate forum the other morning, and one of the issues that I keep thinking about is, God forbid, we have to go backwards as the numbers are starting to creep up a little bit. What are the steps that are being taken, or can you talk a little bit about how you would, or if you would, keep the businesses open even if the numbers do start to creep up as they are?
Yeah, there's a couple of things we look at. Again, whether we open or whether we close again or not, it's obviously a decision of the administration. And it's not just, you don't just look at the infection numbers, you have to look at the hospitalizations and our hospitals being overrun, and do we have the equipment that we need? The good news is, and I give the administration a lot of credit, they've worked very aggressively to make sure that we have the ventilators and the PPE that we need. I feel fairly confident that we will not have to shut down again because we are much better prepared than we were before. We know much more about the disease than we did before. Could I take a second to talk about infrastructure? Because that came up before. As you may or many of you know, I was a member for a number of years in the SEPTA board. And I was one of the leaders when I was in the House when we passed Act 89, which provided about $2 billion a year and still providing $2 billion a year, although we need more for mass transit and our roads and bridges. We were #1 in the nation in bridges that could possibly be collapsing. And I was a leader in my caucus, having my background in mass transit and getting that across the finish line. And in selling that to my colleagues, we heard earlier about there are members that don't have trains, buses, or trolleys or in their area because they're very rural. What people don't understand, and a lot of people in this Commonwealth don't understand, is that here in the Southeast where we live, Delaware County, Bucks County, Montgomery County, Chester County, and Philadelphia, over 45% of the revenue, I want to say that again, 45% of the revenue that comes to Harrisburg comes from our 5 counties out of 67. And that's you. That's a small business community that's developed, that's getting those revenues to Harrisburg. So when I talk to my colleagues to convince them to vote for what became Act 89, to give the money we needed for mass transit, roads, and bridges, I said, okay, I get it. You don't have trains, trolleys, and buses. I get it. But you need our folks to be able to get into work into Philadelphia so that we send personal income tax money, sales tax money to your communities so that you could fund the things that are necessary in your counties. And I was able to swing a number of votes on both sides of the aisle with that argument. We're going to have that argument again as we go back, and I intend to be a leading voice in making sure we have what we need for infrastructure improvements.
Tom, thank you so much for your support through this. Best of luck next week in the election, and we'll be working with you soon.
Great, thank you. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Take care, Tom. So now we're going to move over to the 160th House District race. We have an open seat there, Anton Andrew and Craig Williams. So Anton, we are going to go to you first, and I think I'm we are going to spotlight I think. All right, that was me. Sorry. Now I have to do the spotlighting too. So we got you. So Anton, we're going to give Anton 2.5 minutes. Then we will go to Craig for 2.5 minutes, and then we will ask a question or two, depending on how long I ramble. And I apologize. So Anton, thank you so much for being with us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Trish, and thank you, CPAC, for holding this event. My name is Anton Andrew, and I have lived here in the 160th district, which includes parts of Delaware and Chester counties, for the last 18 years, raising a family. And during that time, as a public defender, a senior advisor and chief of staff to 2 university presidents at Cheney University, local educator and a local environmentalist, I've been fighting for the people and places in my district. But that's only possible because my parents fought for me. They were 2 working class immigrants who came from the West Indies because they so believed in the American dream that they were willing to struggle and start over. My father ran and owned a small cafe in Jamaica where they made the American style food he fell in love with when he came to Howard University, and where he met my mother, who was helping run her small family business, her grandfather's business, that made furniture, handmade furniture for the residents of a small town in Western Jamaica. They came to the States and struggled so that my sister and I could have economic opportunities. And fortunately, with a lot of hard work, a ton of student loans, a lot of on and off campus jobs, I was able to graduate from Penn and go on to law school. The thing that's remarkable about my story is that it is so unremarkable. The American dream has always attracted the best and the brightest from near and far. So in the wake of a global pandemic, which is threatening to put hundreds of thousands of Pennsylvanians struggling with long-term unemployment, it's going to balloon our already alarmingly high structural budget deficit, and it's going to likely increase substantially bankruptcies in small and mid-sized businesses. My goal, my mission is to make sure we unleash the power of our strongest economic engine, and that's local businesses. And having created an incubator for women and minority businesses here in Delaware County, and having helped launch an innovative and one of the first revolving water funds in the country, I have the experience and will provide the bold leadership, along with the assistance and insight from your membership that we'll need to get through this crisis.
Great, Anton, thank you so much. Now we are going to go, and would like to hear from Craig. Craig, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Trish. And thank you, CPAC. I appreciate you putting this forum together today. Just a couple of minutes about me and this race and why I'm running. So I am a retired Marine colonel, 28 years in the service, and a combat veteran of Desert Storm, where I flew 56 combat missions in the Gulf War. While I was in the military, I went to law school on a law education program. So it was through the military that I was able to pay for both my undergraduate and my law school degrees. I then went on to become Judge Advocate General in the United States Marines, where I was Chief Prosecutor of the largest base in the Marine Corps. And then later in my career was Chief Prosecutor of the entire Marine Corps Reserves. Like I said, retired as a colonel after 28 years. Then went off to the Department of Justice, first in Denver, Colorado, and then eventually in Philadelphia, where I prosecuted predominantly violent crimes and gun crimes and public corruption. During that time, I also accepted orders back to active duty, where I was Deputy Legal Counsel to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, where I focused predominantly on ethics and detainee litigation. So in the early days of the War on Terror in 2006, I was the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, predominant litigator when it came to detainee issues involving Guantanamo and Afghanistan. In 2009, I left the Department of Justice, actually 2008, starting in 2009, and joined a company with which you're all familiar. I'm on a leave of absence from PICO, so I'm not their spokesperson right now, but I have spent the last decade working with your utility, which apparently magically does something to your drinking water. We'll talk about that later. It does not. I'm teasing about that, but So I've been with PICO for the last 10 years, working on legislative issues and regulatory litigation to keep our environment clean, to work on electrification of transportation, to work on infrastructure. As you probably know, your utility work is amongst the most important of your infrastructure. So I'm quite accustomed with what's required there. I came into this race, quite honestly, because I got tired of the vitriol and the poisonous and toxic environment that we've had to live in politically. And I just got to a point where I felt like somebody needed to come forward to restore your faith that good people can leave their private lives and come into public service and do it with honor and integrity. So that's why I'm running. Thank you.
Great, Craig, thank you so much. We'll keep you on the screen. We'll start the question with you and then we'll go to Anton. Your district, the 160th House District, has 322 in the 322 corridor, and the infrastructure and the investment that has gone into 322 is paramount across the state and something that the chamber has been working on since the early 1980s. So if you could talk a little bit about the infrastructure needs of your district and how you would work to improve them and how you would work across the state, and not necessarily just 322, but you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I appreciate it. It's not just 322, but we actually have 3 major corridors that run through the 160th, which I'd like to remind you is portions of Upper Chichester, Bethel, Concord, Chadds Ford, Pocopson, Pennsbury, Kennett Township, and Kennett Square Borough. We've got 322, 202, and 1, Baltimore Pike. And each of those is in its own form of disrepair. The good news is, 322 is under renovation right now to expand it from Baltimore Pike all the way out to Highway 95. I can tell you, after 10 years of traveling 322, coming home every evening and sitting in the merge, as we call it, just before the Wawa in Upper Chi, it has been in serious need of expansion for many years. Fortunately, it's underway. It looks like it's on track. If you know anything about Steve Barrar, you know that this is a project that he's very passionate about. He's got maps of it in the conference room of his office, which I, of course, will continue to track and make sure that it stays on budget and on time. Highway 1 all the way out to Kennett Square is in a terrible state of disrepair. I think that needs immediate attention. And I'll tell you that infrastructure dollars that come back into the district have 2- and 3-fold the impact that they do just from beyond simply repairing a road. It is a local job and it's local economy and revenue, all of which benefit the district locally and benefit the 2 counties that we live in. I believe very strongly that one of the most important jobs of your state legislator is to bring those dollars back to the district to make the local environment stronger. I also want to have an economic development council that's going to be comprised of municipal leaders and local small business people that will help us with not only infrastructure, but trying to make the 160th congruous from one end to the other in terms of greenways and economic development.
Great, thank you so much. Anton, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and I apologize if my video freezes. I saw Craig's was freezing a little, so I'm hoping the challenge is on my end. But I absolutely agree with Craig about the need for infrastructure investments, and that's something I have personal experience with. The Disadvantaged Business Enterprises Supportive Services Center, also known as that incubator I mentioned earlier, was a program I launched at Cheney University, which I obtained funding from the US Department of Transportation and PennDOT, as PennDOT was on the verge of losing millions of dollars in federal highway funding because they were not hiring enough small local businesses. I went across the Commonwealth recruiting businesses and reestablishing trust between themselves and PennDOT, working with a Republican administration on the federal level, a Democratic administration on the state level, and local businesses with owners from all different party affiliations on the local level. And we were able to create that program here. And I've seen firsthand, as Craig said, that money, that return on investment is great because the money spent on that is reinvested in local communities. The workers spend that money in their local communities. The business owners are members of those communities. So it is absolutely makes sense for us. It is one of the smartest investments we can make. And especially as we are dealing with this global pandemic, which is going to require us to make some very tough decisions, making sure we support smart investments like infrastructure, including our green infrastructure, which is not only an economic imperative, but an environmental imperative as well. Those are the kinds of investments that I will absolutely make a priority.
Thank you so much, Anton. So we'll have one more question. Would like to hear a little bit about how you would handle keeping our businesses open. And as you know, restaurants still aren't at full capacity. Can you talk a little bit about how you would what your thought process would be in keeping restaurants open, and especially during this colder weather, and businesses during this time? Anton, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Craig, and then we'll wrap up.
Sure. Well, Trish, piggybacking on what Senator Killion has said, because of the proactivity of the governor and his administration in terms of making sure we have the PPE we need to make sure that we have the sufficient equipment and life-saving equipment, including ventilators. The fact that we are climbing up in numbers will not necessarily mean we have to shut down again. Because we're better prepared, we have to talk about things more than just the infection rate, but the hospitalization rate. So the first thing is, I think we're in a much stronger position than we were before. The second thing is, at the end of the day, we cannot reopen or keep open unless we're being safe. So we also understand this disease better. And like, as Senator Killion said, we're in a much better position to make sure that we keep our businesses open going forward. But we have to do it with science. We've learned the hard way that ignoring science is going to keep the economy sputtering and slowing down instead of rebuilding and reestablishing the sort of base we're going to need to move forward. So I see my screen frozen, so I hope you can hear me.
Yep, you're good, but thank you. We're going to wrap up, and we're going to go to Craig. I'll give you a couple seconds so we can move along to the next.
Sorry, it looks like I'm getting some alert. Can you hear me okay?
You are all set. Thank you.
Great, thank you. With regard to reopening, I think that it's very important that we have adequate testing. I'm still struggling, as is Senator Killion, with understanding why some businesses remain closed and others are allowed to open. And I think it has something to do with partisanship more than science, as we continually hear. As we now know, we're beyond the moment where we thought we were going to have to overwhelm our hospital systems and have a lack of ventilators, which was the reason we closed down back in the middle of March. And I'm glad my opponent changing his tune a little bit in our debate last week. He said that we have to choose lives over livelihoods. Now, if you're a small business owner, I don't know how you distinguish between your life and your livelihood when you're trying to provide for your family and keep food in your house and a roof over their table. Roof over their head. There is no distinction for many people when it comes to being able to earn an income and keep your family alive. So I think it's imperative that we have sufficient testing. The universities are great incubators right now for testing. My son at Duke University has been tested more than a dozen times. He's tested every week, and as a result of that, they're able to isolate the virus in the student population and keep it under control so that they can continue their operations. And I think that's one place where your General Assembly can be helpful to you, is in providing testing for those businesses that need to get back going again.
Great. Thank you, Craig. I really appreciate your time. Anton, thank you so much. And now we're going to move over to the 168th House District. We're going to start with Debra. Debra, who is the Democrat running against Chris Quinn. So we're going to spotlight you, Debra. You ready? You'll have your 2.5.
I thought Representative, whoops.
Oh, yeah. So we're going to have you go first.
Okay.
Okay.
I thought Representative Quinn was going first.
The latest agenda that we sent out had you going first.
Okay.
Sorry for the miscommunication. All right,
Okay.
you got your 2.5 minutes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for CPAC for having me here today. I really appreciate it. I think I've got a unique background to become a state representative in the 168th. I started out as a Marine Corps officer. I was a Marine Corps captain at Camp Pendleton, California, the legal officer there at the Camp Pendleton Correctional Facility. I then left the Marine Corps after 5 years, and I became a manufacturing manager at 3 different companies. I was a manufacturing manager at Raytheon on the Patriot missile program. I was a manufacturing manager at Unisys on the computer programs there. And I also was a manufacturing manager at a small company called Neutronics, which is in Exton, Pennsylvania. I served in business for about 15 years. I got my master's degree in business. And after 15 years, I became a high school teacher at Conestoga High School. I taught AP Economics. I taught entrepreneurship there. And I was privileged to teach some of the finest students in the country there. And one thing I learned teaching students is that, students are the future of our country. And whatever I could do to help those students achieve their dreams, that's what I was trying to do. Let me just tell you a little bit about how I think business can be the engine to reignite Pennsylvania over the next, I would say, 15 to 20 years. I think that the coronavirus has kind of knocked us on our feet, off of our feet, but we can re-energize Pennsylvania if we have the leadership from the government, and that's what I think I can provide. I, as a manufacturing manager, a director of manufacturing at Neutronics, one of the things I was proud to do was to lead over 100 employees there in producing products like this. This is a non-dispersive infrared device. And what it did was it recycled Freon and Halon. And the reason I bring that up is I think the future for us in Pennsylvania is to develop new technologies that will give our best students new kinds of jobs that they can have in the future. And when we kind of combine this new Pennsylvania economy with the great schools and colleges that we have here in Pennsylvania, I think we can develop an economy that will rival any across the country. Because one of the problems we have here in Pennsylvania is that so many students are leaving, our best students are leaving to go to other parts of the country. We need them here because, as Senator Killion said, we need new revenue so that we can meet our budget next year. We're gonna have a big budget deficit. I will say, not only do I have experience with myself, my parents owned a Dunkin' Donuts and they owned a couple of other businesses when I was growing up. And one thing that really got to me when I was young was the idea that, they had trouble meeting the payroll sometimes. And I've seen that from the people that I've talked to in the 168th. And you know what they did? They rolled up their sleeves, they worked harder, and they were able to get through it, but only through really hard work. And I'm ready and willing to roll up my sleeves and work hard for you. So thank you.
Thank you so much for your time this morning. Chris Quinn.
Am I muted? Am I ready?
You are all set. You ready to go?
I am. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Trish. Thanks for having me. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's Chris Quinn. I've been the state representative for the 168th since 2016. The 168th, it encompasses a small portion of Marple, Newtown, Media, Middletown, Upper Providence, Chester Heights, Thornbury, Edgemont. So it's sort of southwest Elko. Anyway, my background, I've born Delaware County, lived here most of my life, graduated from Pencrest High School. After leaving college, I ended up going to work in the electronics industry. Worked for a company called Flextronics, largest contract manufacturer in the world, headquartered out of Singapore. I was the global account manager that called on Lucent Technologies, which was bought by Alcatel, Ericsson, lots of mergers. Anyway, when the telecom bubble burst back around 2005, I started a small business, which I still operate today. It's an insurance agency. Can't say it's growing much these days. Spent a lot of my time in Harrisburg. Anyway, I have big business experience. I have small business experience. Served on Middletown Township Council for about 10 years and other various organizations inside of the county. They asked me to run for state representative back in 2016, which I did. Anyway, I'm doing my best to represent the district. It's a crazy time. I think right now, our conversation should be more about infrastructure. It should be about reducing taxes, regulations. Instead, we're stuck talking about COVID. We're stuck talking about how do we open our small businesses back up? How do we keep things moving, which isn't any fault of anyone's. From the standpoint, COVID is something that hit us and we've had to try to figure out how to respond. But at this point, I think we are far enough along in the cycle that we have enough information and we need to open up all of our small businesses. I think I see my 30-second from Alex. Anyway, thank you. Trish?
I am back. Sorry. Our technical difficulties, and thank you to Ed Kelly for answering my call because he was just about to take over because we were frozen here. So if it does happen again that my computer gets tossed out here like it has been, Ed will ask the questions and we'll be talking that way. So Ed, thank you for not ignoring my call. Chris, thank you so much. Deb, thank you. Chris, can you talk a little bit about what you've done during the pandemic and how you kind of worked for the businesses and, tried to keep the resources coming and keep them open? Okay,
so from almost from day one, we started in a very collaborative way, a very bipartisan. In Harrisburg, it was bipartisan. We knew what we needed to do, but it didn't take long for the wheels to come off, for the partisanship to start. After we fought to try to get a process put in place that would allow for waivers for certain businesses to be opened, it began to become a partisan process where certain businesses were getting waivers and others weren't. So we went back and literally from day one, we've been fighting to try to save small business. There's absolutely no reason why a big box store should be able to be open literally with lines that wrap around the outside of it, but yet a small business, a hardware store or lawn and garden shop shouldn't be open. So I've essentially voted for almost every bill. I think I have voted for every bill that would allow small businesses to open and function safely. Use the CDC guidelines. There's no difference, or there shouldn't be a difference between a big box store and a mom and pop shop.
All right, thank you, Chris. Deb, similar question. How would you handle, keeping these businesses open? I know that the governor can make his own orders and his own rules, but it's paramount that we keep these small businesses open regardless of what the numbers look like, and we can do so safely. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you would handle that situation?
So first of all, I think that the first thing you need both in Harrisburg and in the federal government is leadership. We need leadership on this coronavirus. We can't pretend that it's going away. We need leadership to talk to people and fight for people. One of the things I've been doing over the last 6 months is I've been talking to business owners in this district. I've been talking to flower shops and restaurants, and I've been acting. I've been making phone calls for them. I've been helping them get the resources that they need, to get the money they need to help them open up. I think we need some innovation right now. We are going to have to deal with a very difficult time over the next few months. Unlike what the president is saying, the coronavirus is not going away. It's here right now in Delaware County. We need to do something right now. And if you look at what some of the restaurant owners are doing, which is having tents out in the middle of State Street and using heaters so that they can remain open, that's probably one of the things that we're going to have to do to get through some of this. But the number one thing we need to do is we need to help get this infection rate down so that we can have schools open and businesses open. And I think the best thing we can do as a representative is to talk to the people. That's what representatives do. Talk to the restaurants, the other businesses, and find out what they need. And I agree with someone else who was on here before. We need to make the paperwork process much easier for people. Because I talked to a restaurant owner on State Street, and the paperwork was so onerous for her. And I'm getting her help so she can figure that out. So I think helping smooth out the paperwork, expanding help maybe even subsidizing some of the additional tents and heaters that we need for restaurant owners. That's what we need to do in the immediate future.
Thank you so much. We're almost to time on this question, but I do, again, infrastructure in your district is paramount, and we are seeing a lot of development and a lot of changing things happening there. Debra, I'll start with you. If you could talk quickly about how you would handle infrastructure, and then we'll go to Chris.
So, I mean, I taught AP economics, I taught macroeconomics. One of the things you look at, the best way to move the production possibilities curve, which is this idea of how can we grow our economy, is by creating infrastructure. And we need to do that. And it has to be an investment. It can be a public-private investment, but it needs to be an investment. We should not be riding on crumbling roads and crumbling bridges. Because as Senator Killion said, if we have businesses here who can't move their product, who can't go across a bridge because they have to go around it, it's hurting all of our businesses. So we need to support business. We need to set aside money. And it not only should be a private partnership with our local economy, we should have a federal partnership with our local government.
Great. Debra, thank you so much. Chris?
Thank you.
I agree with my opponent. That's why I've worked so hard to bring funding back to the district. For instance, the intersections of 452 and Baltimore Pike, we've got all the approvals. We have most of the funding for that project to start. We've got, I think we have brought back $5 million for the intersection of Westchester Pike and 252 to improve the traffic flow there. Obviously, everyone that's going down 252 knows that we're redoing the dam and that infrastructure. The overpass at 352 in Baltimore Pike, that's slated. We've had multiple meetings with PennDOT at this point. Another infrastructure thing that I've been pushing, and we've started meetings with PennDOT, is actually 476, trying to figure out how to use technology to use the breakdown lanes on 476 so that we can improve the flow of traffic there at high traffic times. So those meetings have started, and I'm hoping within the next few years that we're going to see some progress from those conversations. So
Great.
Thanks, Trish.
Chris, thank you so much. Debra, thank you, and best of luck next week.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so now we're going to move to the 165th House District. We will start with Bob Smythe, Robert Smythe Jr., and then we will move to Jen O'Mara. Bob, how are you? Thanks for being with us this whole time this morning. Wait, hold on. Are you muted? Or maybe it's just me. Can anybody else hear Bob? This could be my technical issue. Hang on one second. There we go. Can we go? Do you want to talk again? No, I can't hear you.
Now?
I can.
Yeah,
Yes, there you go. Sorry. Thank you. It's probably my.
Lot of experience with Zoom as a classroom teacher. These things happen all the time. It's unfortunate. But thank you guys for hosting this forum today. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. My name's Bob Smythe, and I'm the Republican candidate for the 165th District. I'm the only candidate in the district to have the endorsement of both the PA Chamber of Business in the district and the NFIB. And that's because I'm also the only candidate in the district who understands the challenges of small businesses and that the owners of small businesses, the challenge they face. And I'm the only candidate that's truly committed to supporting them now when they're in the time of their most need. My opponent, whom I have great respect for, unfortunately doesn't understand the challenges that are current and that face our local economy. She claims to be a friend of small business and that she's there for them, but when they needed her support the most, she voted lock in step with the governor, putting party over people. I'm sure today we're going to hear about those votes being about safety, about being based on metrics and science, and being about money and federal funding. The reality is that's simply not true. In our last debate a few months ago, my opponent said that everything reopened in June except restaurants, and that the issue is people simply weren't going out. There are entire industries and career fields that have been impacted and are still impacted, not just by the pandemic, but by the Wolf administration's approach to picking winners and losers. My wife, who works in event planning for a local company, lost her job a few months back, and we've become a one-income family, and we're living on a public school teacher's salary, which is really concerning given we're in the process of seeing our family expand. So I truly understand the concerns that are facing the small business owners in this district and the concerns that they have. I understand the severity and the reality of this virus. I've seen it firsthand as a first responder. But I also understand that small businesses and our local economy are at the very fabric of who we are in the 165th and what make these municipalities and these communities such a great place to live and raise a family. And instead of supporting them and being there for them as they have always been there for us, unfortunately, a lot of our elected officials have vilified and blamed small business owners without any credible evidence, showing a real lack of leadership and accountability. So I'm going to change that, and I will be there for them. Thank you.
Bob, thank you so much. So we're going to go over to Jen O'Mara. Jen?
Good morning, everyone. It's great to see you. I'm Jennifer O'Mara. I am the incumbent in the 165th Legislative District. Prior to being elected, I worked as an administrator at the University of Pennsylvania. I was also in graduate school, and I also ran my own small business. I had an employee of one, and my grandmother was a small business owner for most of her life. So I know my opponent spends a lot of time talking about me. Unfortunately, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to talk about my record. And so when I first got to Harrisburg, one of the first things I started tackling was the Student Debt Caucus. And I did that because student debt is impacting working families all across our state. It's preventing them from buying homes, from buying cars, from becoming taxpayers, and it's preventing them from staying in Pennsylvania, like was mentioned before. And so it's a bipartisan group. We're not focused on free college, but instead how to help working families make better decisions to prevent ending up in $36,000 of debt, which is the average. When the outbreak started, I spent a lot of time trying to make sure I was representing my district. I met with small business owners, some organized by the Chamber of Commerce. I met with teachers, I met with nurses, I met with first responders. And at the beginning, when some of these votes were going on, I had nurses crying on Zoom because they didn't have enough PPE. Hospitals were overrun in Delaware County. The National Guard was here in our district because staff who were traveling on public transportation were bringing COVID into nursing homes. And so at the beginning, I was voting to protect our district and to make sure that we were prepared. And now and to be clear, during that time, I also voted to reopen lawn and garden centers. I wrote legislation to bring back real estate, and that's why the PA Realtors have endorsed me in this election. I also, over the summer, took independent action, planning webinars to help small business owners learn how to apply for state grants, joining a bipartisan group of Delaware County elected officials to call for more funding through DCED. I also organized Christmas in July with the help of the Delco Chamber of Commerce to try to drive out support to small businesses. And at the request of small businesses, I started doing small business spotlights, and I've helped drive support to businesses like Leary's Florist and others in our area. And now I've been voting to serve the community as much as possible. I've voted to overturn the governor's veto about school sports because now I believe we're in a much better position. We have PPEs, kids are back in school. At the beginning of this pandemic, childcare wasn't an option, and that was also a critical issue.
Jen, thank you so much. We'll stay with you because I know, you've been in Harrisburg for 2 years, and these last, I would say, 9 to 10 months have been the most challenging for small businesses and all businesses for that matter. And particularly one of the issues that is it makes me think the most and is nervous about is the fact that, and we talked about this in a couple other times, that as the numbers creep up, there's the uncertainty from so many that are the businesses going to have to close? Or, will the governor make those mandates? How would you, or what would you do to keep these businesses open? We need to make sure that that's paramount. And, can you talk a little bit about what happened during the pandemic and then what you would do to make sure that we keep these businesses open?
Yeah, well, at the beginning, like I mentioned, childcare and schools weren't open. So workers were nervous about reopening before those supports for working families were put into place. But we've worked really hard over the summer to get enough PPE. So there's now a 90-day supply rather than a 3 to 5 day supply at our hospitals. We also we know more. At the beginning of this, we weren't even wearing masks. Now we know more, and we have hand sanitizers more easily available. Cleaning supplies are more easily available. For the first time yesterday, I found wipes in the grocery store. And so I think the governor and Dr. Levine have mentioned they're not planning a shutdown. I don't think that would be the answer. I think instead now we would have to allow small businesses to stay open with curbside pickup or limiting the number of customers that come in at a time. At the beginning of this pandemic, that wasn't an option because we didn't have the resources that we needed. Testing was scarce, but now it's there, and schools are open and daycares are open, and they're able to, seemingly so, they're doing well and they're able to sustain that. So I think we have more supports now to prevent the need to shut down the economy. And we know more about this. And hopefully when we go back to Harrisburg, we'll be able to work in a bipartisan way to allocate some of that $1.3 billion to our small business owners so they can get the resources they need to stay open through the winter.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Bob? So, you've been, let's make sure we spotlight you. Okay, there we go. So, as you've been campaigning, you've been out talking to business owners, you're hearing their struggles, but towards the same question, can you talk about how you would approach keeping businesses open? What you would do if you were in the legislature to make sure that we don't go backwards again?
Yes, and thank you, Ms. McFarland, for asking this question, because I think it's one of the most important issues we're dealing with right now, not just in the district, but in the state. As I've gone around, for the last, 5 months, whatever it's been, that's very much at the forefront of everyone's concerns that I run into. That we have a ton of small business owners in the 165th, and even more people that work in small businesses, and they are terrified that the governor is again going to shut them down or close them down. And I think what most people are frustrated by, so there's the fear piece of their business being impacted again, but the frustration comes in with the lack of transparency and equity with which these shutdowns have been handled. And when it comes to the way that the decisions have started to change with some of our elected leadership, such as my opponent, I think it's great that the tune is changing, but there's almost no rhyme or reason to it. It's very interesting that all of a sudden we're changing our approach to what we think is safe for the businesses all of a sudden when we're getting towards an election. The numbers are going up in terms of the metrics that have been used in the beginning and throughout the summer to keep these restrictions in place. And then all of a sudden, as these metrics continue to go up, we are changing our position. So now it's safe. Now we have the PPE. Now there's wipes. These things have been been available for months, and yet the votes continue to have been in favor of restrictions and supporting the governor and picking winners and losers. So either it's about the metrics and it's about safety, or it's about politics and party. And that's what it looks like to me. And that's unfortunate because we're putting people in a very advantageous position economically in favor of political allegiance. And I think we have a great opportunity here for folks that are in office to say that they will not support continuing the governor's emergency declaration powers to keep these restrictions and closures in place. And I think if our elected officials do that here today, it will alleviate a lot of the stress that people are feeling, like you mentioned in the question.
Thank you for your answer. One more question for the 165th House District. Recently, we've seen we've had a couple of things happen over the past few days, and there has been a lot of looting, a lot of riots right next to us, right to our next door. And when we had this the last time, I know the law enforcement officers were out, protecting the businesses here in Delaware County. Is there anything that you can talk about to how we can handle that, how we can address that right now? Bob, we'll start with you. with the looting and against businesses, and I may be frozen, so hopefully I don't freeze on a weird face. But can you talk about how we would protect our law enforcement officers as well as our small businesses and even large businesses if those unfortunate acts start to trickle down here into Delaware County again?
Yeah, and thank you for that, because this is another question that I get a lot as I've been going around. A lot of people really concerned and fearful for their safety, and that's unfortunate. And for multiple reasons, not just because of the threat of civil unrest, but also people that are concerned about their safety with regard to law enforcement and things of that nature. As a 10-year classroom educator who worked in districts that are extremely diverse, I understand about as much as a person from my background, being a white man from the suburbs, what the challenges and the tension and the fear in communities of color. So I understand that, and I think we need to do a better job getting people a place at the table and having a voice. That being said, there is no excuse for damaging private property and for threatening people's safety. And what's happening right now to the law enforcement community is unacceptable. 30 police officers in the city of Philadelphia have been injured in the last 48 hours. My father has been in law enforcement for 50 years. In fact, this weekend he's going to retire. I have the utmost respect for people that wear uniforms. They do not get the credit that they deserve. They put their lives on line every day to protect our safety and our property. And what we're doing right now to the law enforcement community in the way that we're vilifying them in the media is only going to significantly damage law enforcement's ability to protect us and our property going forward, and is not conducive to rebuilding a relationship between them and our community and protecting people. I support increasing training. I support getting them the funding that they need and listening to law enforcement, because they do want to do the best job. That's why they put the badge on, to help and protect people, not to hurt people. So I am
perfect.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. No, that's all right. We're going to time, and so now we're going to go to Jen, and then we're going to wrap up the 165th. I appreciate your time, Jen. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. That's a great question. So I've worked really hard to establish close relationships with the 4 local police departments in my district and the FOP. I actually meet with the chiefs in my community on a pretty regular basis. And so during the first time this happened, I was in touch with them each day to make sure they had the resources and the staff that they needed. They did a great job of being in large parking lots in our community. We have a few. We have Home Depot in Marple. We have Walmart in Marple and a couple other places. And they were there waiting. And so there were actually a few incidents where cars drove through the parking lots, but because our police officers were already there, they left and didn't cause any damage. So I want to continue doing that. I fought to bring resources back to the district for first responders, bringing $100,000 back in grants for police departments, $60,000 for Morton and $40,000 for Radnor. I also have been very close with the Delaware County Fraternal Order of Police. Just this week, they asked me down to their meeting to give them an update, and I made sure to start that off by thanking them for the work they do and letting them know that I stand there to support law enforcement. My dad was a firefighter in Philadelphia, and police and fire family are really one and the same in that city. And he died by suicide, and he's buried in Cobb's Creek. And so I really hope that we see peace in that area of the city, because there is no excuse for looting and violence. It doesn't bring justice. It doesn't bring equality. And it's not the answer ever. And so I hope to see that stop. Also, one other thing, we're in Delaware County working in a bipartisan way to help get money to bring a new telecom system, because right now our first responders will sometimes experience times where their radios go out and they can't communicate with one another. So they're relying on their cell phones. We can't let that happen. And so I'm going to continue to push for that. So thank you, Trish. It was a great question. And thank you to CPAC and everyone for having this event today.
Jen, Bob, I really appreciate your time today, and good luck next Tuesday. I just muted myself. I'm sorry. So we're moving into the 163rd House race. We're going to start with Mike McCollum. Mike, how are you?
Trish, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good. We're going to spotlight you, and then you can get ready to go. All right, thanks. The floor is yours, Mike.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank the Chamber for hosting this event. It's a real privilege to talk to everyone directly. A little about myself. I lived in Haverford Township my whole life. I worked for the United States Post Office for 24 years, right here in Pilgrim Gardens, which is a vast majority of my district. I've been a volunteer with several organizations for 29 years. The first 21 of them as a coach with no children involved, just, donating my time. I got involved because, I thought there's a chance to make a change. Right now, I see our small businesses are really hurting, especially restaurants and bars, actually the entire hospitality industry. And you have my word that I'll always stand up for small businesses. I'll actually take it a step further. Any legislation that comes across my desk, I would reach out to the Chamber to see if there's any recommendations or any of the legislation that would affect members to help them or hurt them, just so we know, where we stand on that. And I'd also put my name on any piece of legislation that would help businesses and help them reopen safely. Businesses can remain open. The protocol's there, the CDC guidelines are there. There's no reason that small businesses, like some of our other candidates have said earlier, can't follow these like they have been and remain open just like the big box companies have. Without small businesses, our industry hurts. Like one of our other candidates said this morning, 43 to 45% of the state revenue comes from southeastern PA. And we got to keep them open safely to keep producing the revenue, to keep this state running. Thank you.
Mike, thank you so much. Now I want to go to Mike Zabel. Mike, how are you?
Good, Trish, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yep, you're all set.
I want to apologize first to the Chamber. Most people start by thanking, but apologizing for being the only candidate, I think, or male candidate not appearing in a tie. My little girl had a doctor's appointment this morning, and then I had to take my son to childcare. My wife had a Zoom call of her own at 8:30, which meant I had to hold her until the babysitter could get here, who couldn't. The only reason she was available is because Temple is not having live classes. And then I Zoomed and sequestered myself off here before I could have a chance to get dressed. And I say that all just as a precursor, but to talk about something that I think Representative Quinn said really well, which is that COVID is no one's fault. It happened to all of us, and we're all living with the effects of it and how to get through it. We're all wrestling with it. Some of the things I deal with, for example, in terms of that on a personal level, are childcare, which is affecting our workforce. And my wife, who's worked remotely since March, and whether her job security related to that. And, my job is inherently, I'm not complaining about it. My job is inherently insecure in that every 2 years, electors decide whether you want to keep it. And I worry if I'm not doing my job well, am I going to lose my employees? If I'm not managing COVID correctly, are 5 or 6 people going to lose their job? That is a pressure I carry with me. And I think about, when I think about how we make choices in the legislature, how we talk to small businesses, how we talk to large businesses, how we make everything, how we handle this. Because I think, actually, you've heard it pretty well on this panel. You've heard a lot of thoughtful and considered things. You as business owners, you might hear sometimes in political rhetoric that you care about profits and not health. And that's not true. That's not true. Likewise, sometimes you'll hear a rhetoric that people don't care about small businesses, they only care about health or politics. That's not true. There's no panelist on this call, no official, that doesn't believe in trying to find that right balance between keeping our economy going and keeping our most vulnerable safe. So that is some of the balance that I try to bring as a legislator. I'll just touch on a few things. I have a bill that would infuse $325 million into our small business grant program that was introduced in the Commerce Committee last month. I also am a co-sponsor of a bill that would lower our corporate net income tax rate over 5 years from 9.9, I see time's up, would lower it 4 points. So that's House Bill 1445. I won't go over my time. Thank you very much.
Mike, thank you. So we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Mike McCollum. Same kind of question I asked the last time about keeping the businesses open. The restaurants, very critical where they stand right now. What, they have been allowed to open up a little bit more. But as we move into the colder months, as well as the numbers are creeping up, can you talk a little bit about how you voted during the pandemic and with the businesses and restaurants, and then talk about how we can continue to keep the restaurants open safely?
Sure, that's a huge concern. And in fact, just recently, the most recent thing we voted on, between the time we'd voted on it the last time and the time before that, the number of COVID cases in Pennsylvania had doubled. And in fact, we've had our highest number of COVID cases today, yesterday in Pennsylvania and in the country. So all these decisions get made in the context of when they are made. That's important. Because as much as I talk to small business owners, I also talk to nurses who staff ICUs. And that's one of our critical factors to look at is how are our ICUs filling up? And they're beginning, our hospitalization rate has been low, but it is starting to creep up again. And with a problem like that, you cannot be reactive. You have to be proactive. But to the businesses, I think what we have to do, I mentioned the $325 million program that I've actually worked on with the governor's office, specifically 100 million of that, of that 325, and that's existing CARES money, would go directly to the hospitality industry. It couldn't go anywhere else, and it would go specifically targeted to small businesses. And as to the other 225 million, they would be eligible for that as well. In fact, 50% of the small business recipients to the program so far have been restaurants. So you're looking at somewhere north of $200 million. And this would be done through our existing CDFI network so that people could get money they've already applied, they could go through right now. Because what I don't want is another program that takes time and confusion and there's lack of transparency. We want something where they can get that money now. And in terms of grants, not loans, because a loan doesn't really solve the problem. It just kicks the can down the curb. So those are some of the things. The other thing I am concerned about, which is related to the restaurants, is event venues and their ability to host events. And that has been a concern I've had since the very beginning. It's one of the things I liked about 2513 and spoke to the governor a lot about, which was moving to a capacity-based model as opposed to that hard cap that we had in place. And advocacy as a legislator is a complicated thing. It's not just your votes, but it's those discussions that you have. And I was gratified to see the administration move to a model that allows for greater capacities with business owners who are catering and restaurants are doing so responsibly. So I'm a supporter of that, but it's always about striking a balance. It's never as simple as one or the other, as I'm sure all of these business owners know.
Okay, thank you. Mike McCollum, similar question. Can you talk a little bit about how you would approach that?
Yes, it's interesting that my opponent, they tell you that supports small business. It's easy to vote on bills that receive unanimous or almost unanimous support in the House. But most recently, a bill came up where he voted for, and I guess he didn't take into consideration the number of Republicans that could override this veto, and then he flip-flopped on this. There were a few votes to overturn this veto that would allow businesses to open up, to expand a bit, and to open up and operate safely like they know how and like they have been. These are our neighbors, our friends, members of this organization. And there's a lot of tax revenue that's lost as well. So it's a twofold thing. Businesses are hurting. The Commonwealth's not getting the tax dollars. So like I said before, you have my word that I would stand up for small business. If a bill comes across my desk that is going to help businesses and operate safely, I'm all for it. I'm not going to flip-flop on a vote. Thank you.
Okay, Mike, we're going to stay with you. Mike McCollum, I'm sorry, I need to go by last names, I forget. So similar question to the last time, but was very critical in the last sort of civil unrest that we had here in the region, particularly with the 69th Street corridor. And while I know that that's not technically in the district, but we are seeing the unrest and the looting happening right next door to us. So is there anything that you can talk about to kind of protect the businesses from that? And maybe, as our law enforcement officers, I know that everybody has their own feelings on them, but making sure that they have the resources that they need. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So first and foremost, I absolutely support law enforcement. Anyone that doesn't give law enforcement their 100% backing is foolish, in my opinion. Just last night, right in Drexel Hill, right close to where you and I are from, there's a mobile phone store. I watched them board up the windows. Right in Pilgrim Garden Shopping Center, there was officers from Haverford Township and Upper Darby Township there with their lights on, just letting people know that we're here to prevent this loitering. I saw the same thing at Marple last night at the Home Depot, up at the Lowe's, 69th Street, and the civil arrest that went down up there, it's unexplainable. And there's things that could have been done by local townships. Upper Darby has since, sorry about that. You still have me?
We can still hear you. Yep.
I'm sorry. My phone fell. There's things that were taken away from them, vehicles that can help. And again, just giving law enforcement everything they need to protect the business owners and the residents. I think most of our chiefs are doing a tremendous job, particularly the superintendent of Upper Darby, Mr. Tim Bernhardt. He's in a very tough situation where there's a lot of things going on internally within the township, and I think he's just handled it tremendously. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Mike Zabel? Same question.
Sure. I think you saw Upper Darby Police at 69th Street sorry. This is only my 800th mute Zoom, and where I've had to unmute myself, so it's an anniversary. I largely agree with my opponent. I think, for example, down at 69th Street, which is, even though it's not part of the district, I very much consider it in a symbiotic economic and community sense related to the district. I think you saw a great job by the Upper Darby Police yesterday and neighboring police forces who came in to proactively stop and head off at the pass opportunistic looters. And I do think it needs to be clear that what we saw at 69th Street a couple months ago was opportunism. It was not tied into civil protest. It was opportunistic. In fact, you see, I was down there the very next day, picking up glass, trash, and helping the community come back together with that. So of course, we have to make sure that we have, and I think the Upper Darby Police and its partners have done a great job in the last day or two. And of course, I support them on that effort.
Great, thank you so much. So we're going to wrap up the 163rd race, and best of luck to Mike Zabel and Mike McCollum next Tuesday. So now we're going to go into oh, sorry, go ahead. We're good?
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So now we're going to go to the 161st State House District. Unfortunately, Ralph was not able to join us this morning, but we have Representative Leanne Krueger, and Leanne, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, Trish, and good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining this forum. I'll just take a quick moment to introduce myself and talk about what I've been working on during the COVID-19 pandemic, because I know so many of the questions have revolved around that. So I was elected to the State House 5 years ago. I'm running for re-election next week. And before I ran for office, I spent 15 years working in economic development. I have an MBA in community economic development from Eastern University, a proud local institution. And I worked to help people start small businesses. And so one of the reasons that I ran for office in the first place is I believe that Pennsylvania's economic development resources were mostly developed to help large out-of-state corporations and not built to help the local small businesses that are the job creators and the pillars of our local economy. That's why I ran for office in the first place, to affect change on the issues that I cared about. And as I saw entrepreneur after entrepreneur after entrepreneur struggle with red tape and the challenges of an economic development system that was benefiting their large multinational competitors, instead of them, I decided that we needed to change that. 5 years later, I have worked very hard to bring resources to small business owners here in Delaware County and in my district. And when the COVID-19 pandemic stepped up, it hit, my staff and I really worked hard to step up to serve people well. Early on, we were helping to distribute PPE for local businesses and answering questions about the waiver program. I personally called businesses over the course of a weekend when the application went live to make sure that they didn't miss the deadline. Then we pushed for millions of dollars in emergency loans to help businesses that have been impacted. Loans of up to $100,000, and again, made sure that local businesses in my district knew about that program. Then when we realized that loans actually weren't the answer, that nobody could afford to take on more debt at this time, and that we really needed grants, I pushed hard for small business grants and was proud to vote for a new program, $225 million in COVID relief small business assistance grants. And then I worked closely with the chamber and with our county council and the Commerce Department to get the word out about those loans and those grants, even running workshops for local businesses to make sure that they knew about the deadlines. All along the way, I and my colleagues on this call have been fighting hard for small businesses, and I'm happy to take your questions this morning.
I think we lost Trish again, Ed. If you want to do a question, if
Yeah.
not, I can jump in.
Yeah, no, I'll jump in on that one. Yeah, Trish is frozen. So,
Thanks,
so Leanne,
Ed.
I guess this will be similar to, some of the other questions that were asked earlier, but particularly with regard to infrastructure and, its impact on business in the area. And obviously with your district, you have some major thoroughfares coming through. So what have you been working on with regard to infrastructure, and what needs do you see moving forward that would need, would need some improvement from the state level?
Thanks, Ed. Thank you so much for that question. So I think increased infrastructure funding is incredibly important, not just for my district, but for all of us here in Delaware County. When I think of infrastructure, I think of our public transit system. Not as many people are using it now because folks are still predominantly working from home, but SEPTA is an essential piece of our infrastructure. And, small businesses need it for their employees to get to work. They need it for their customers to come see them. And SEPTA will be in a dire strait for funding. So as we look into the next budget season, fighting for transit funding, I think is going to be something that all of us here in Delaware County need to step up and work on together. I also co-chair the Blue Green Caucus, so I've been convening leaders of labor organizations and environmental organizations to talk about common ground. One of the things I appreciate most about the Delaware County Chamber is that you have labor unions that are actually part of your membership. And unlike groups like the NFIB and the Pennsylvania Chamber of Commerce, who are staunchly anti-labor, the Delco Chamber really understands that we've got so many blue collar families here in Delaware County, and we need to be working together to ensure good wages and fair working conditions. So we're talking about legislation that could be introduced next session that would have support both from labor and from environmental groups. And when we talk about an energy transition, when we talk about supporting clean air and clean water, there are significant infrastructure needs here in Pennsylvania, and that's one of the things I'll be fighting for.
Thank you. And I have one more for you, Leanne, and it's about, again, another topic we've been talking about, particularly with regard to the bars and restaurants in the area. And, almost, many of them are small businesses. Can you talk about some of the efforts to try and, expand the capacity in a safe manner, but also, what we've been hearing is sometimes the communication or lack thereof, from the business owners of what's going to happen next and how they can plan for that. Maybe ways that you might see that we can improve from perhaps the governor's office on down.
Thanks so much, Ed. So there's been many times when I've heard complaints on the ground from small businesses here in Delaware County, or was talking to one of my colleagues and heard of a challenge and directly called the governor's office to ask for action. And I think the advocacy from the specifically the House Democrats who've been on this call today have actually led to some of the loosening regulations that we've seen over the past few months, because we've called and said, look, this is what we're hearing from realtors in our district. This is what we're hearing from restaurant owners. This is what we're hearing from garden centers. And we really need some changes in policy. I am going to vote to protect public health. And I think that is something that we need to really be conscious of. But I also think that maintaining a good working relationship with the administration who put the restrictions in place in the first place is incredibly important for advocating for our small business community here in Delaware County.
Great, thank you. And I think now I turn it back to Trish because she's back online.
I am back. And again, Ed, thank you for jumping in as Jacqueline and I are the only ones here right now, but we both got kicked off at the same time. So I thank everybody for their patience with our, the Wi-Fi is up. I don't know what happens. I think it's our computers.
I think it's the rainstorm today, Trish, actually, because
and
I was
I
having
don't
some
know what
issues
the weather's
earlier.
like outside. So thank you. I appreciate it. Leanne, thank you for your time. Ed, thank you for being great as always and jumping right in. So now we're going to move over to the 159th House District. We have Ruth Moton with us this morning. And I do think, Ruth, we have you. We just upgraded you to panelist here. So I think, are you ready to go, Ruth? Are you here with us?
Yes.
Ruth, how are you?
I'm
All
well,
right,
thank
so
you.
the floor is yours. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Ruth Moton. I'm running for State House in the 159th Legislative District. And I have been on here for a little bit and listening to the other panelists. As far as myself, what I have to bring to the table to my district and to the state of Pennsylvania comes from both sides. I am a small business owner, and I've actually, have worked on the other side as far as entry level, working my way up to middle and upper management. Actually, I believe years ago, I was part of the Chamber of Commerce when I was an active realtor in media at Weichert Realtors. I got into the race. It wasn't something that I set out in order to do. It was myself being a consumer. Chester Water Authority, attending the meetings pertaining to the sale and all that was going on with that. And it was then when I noticed more so as far as the lack of representation that we not only have as a district, but in the state of Pennsylvania and this part of Delaware County, there isn't anyone advocating for either on the business end nor the consumer end. Yes, I know that small businesses, again, I'm a small business owner. I own one that I started for my grandchildren. I have 7. But on the other side, as far as consumers, those being able to actually go out and spend it within the community. I was seeing their struggle through COVID with not being able to receive their not only information, but their unemployment in a timely manner. And there are people that are still waiting from March. So other than like work history, I've run regions in the Midwest for a large corporation. And that's Ruth. I'm a worker, 3 adult children, married to a Marine for 27 years and 7 grandchildren.
Ruth, thank you so much. You touched on the unemployment and how folks have been struggling to get their benefits. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you were able to help them? What you did and.
Okay. Well, one thing about the company that I own and I started is for my grandchildren. I'm a videographer. So as far as technology is concerned, I'm not a stranger to it. When the CARES Act was initially passed and I read over the bill, and as I watched here in Pennsylvania, the website, and I have designed website, written code myself, but I watched it unfold. And even when the website was up and running and it crashed, but even when the bandwidth was there and it was maybe able to support the button for someone to actually apply for their benefits, it took weeks to get that button up and running for people to actually apply. Once it was up and running, then they had to go back. And a lot of people didn't realize that after the initial application, they had to do each week leading up to the present week. So those were things that I were able to let people know about. And then as the PUC, and it expanded, and it's like the EUC, the PEUC, and then that caused confusions throughout the community. So when people had questions, I would aid them as much as I could, walk them through the steps. Them being on their computer, me being on mine, if need be, if I had to show up somewhere with a laptop, and of course, everyone safe distance, mask, and following, the orders as far as the orders, yes, you have to follow the law as far as the guidelines for what to do per COVID. A lot of people, all ages, and it didn't matter, either they did not have a way to apply online because everyone has a cell phone. And it could have been something as small as saying, you know what, you can't do it, you know, in cellular mode, switch the desktop, and then we can go through it that way. But there are still people that are still waiting. And what's interesting, the state has actually started to pay some of them. But if they've had filed from week 1 to 34, the state paid for week 34 and 33, not the rest, not the back.
So you have been helping many throughout this. Well, we appreciate your help because we were getting so many of those calls and so many people needed the help. And thank you for helping.
No problem. I mean, and you know what? That's just what I'm used to do. If something needs to be done, you just do it without title. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to share?
No, just basically the lack of representation that we have in the 159th Legislative District. There has been one leader there for 27 years. And, you know, during COVID, what COVID did, I don't find 2020 as a bust. I see that it has shined a light on all of our flaws, what need to be addressed. And I've compiled a team and I'm just ready to hit the ground running in whatever capacity and whatever the need is. So.
Ruth, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this morning.
Thank
Best
you.
of luck next Tuesday.
Thank you.
Okay. So now we're going to move to the 166th House District. We have Christine Boyle with us this morning. Christine, how are you? You want to tell us a little bit about yourself? Thanks for being on this whole time too. Christine was here since 8:50, right?
Yeah, it was great. Thank you so much. Thank you for including me in this forum. And I apologize for my late response. I don't know what happened to the first email that was sent out, but I apologize. And I thank you for letting me join the meeting at a late notice. My name is Christine Boyle. I'm running for House Representative in the 166th District. I am running against the incumbent Greg Vitale. Greg has been in office for 27 years, like Ruth had just mentioned, I guess her opponent. He has, over the years, become a single issue candidate here in the district, and I don't believe that he's representing the interests of the people. I have lived here for 26 years in the district, raised 3 children in the district who have participated in many of the community events and schools and activities through the schools. I have been involved in many of the community events and been involved in schools that they have attended. My husband is from the district and has lived here for 55 years. We're very involved in everything from community events to local businesses and, you know, Haverford Township Day and things like that. We've always been present and supporting them. The reason this is my first entry into the political arena. The reason that I decided to run is because I had reached out to Greg Vitale's office last summer about the vaping issue, which was very concerning to me, that there was last summer, there was so many, I guess, well, summer of 2019, I should say at this point, there was so many children in our area that were becoming addicted to the vaping issue. And there was several of them that had become seriously ill. And I had reached out to his office to find out what the legislature had intended to do. And when I knew that other states were passing bills to prohibit the sale to minors, especially to the flavored vaping products. But his response was so lackluster to me that I was horrified. I started looking into his record and to his lack of effectiveness in the district, and I decided to put my name in the ring and run. I am a lawyer by trade. I have been practicing in Philadelphia since 1994. I graduated from Brooklyn Law School in New York and was a public defender in Manhattan for 5 years right out of law school. I think my background as a lawyer, as an advocate for my clients will help me become a successful state representative.
Christine, thank you so much. And before we let you go this morning, can you talk a little bit about, obviously we've been talking about the pandemic a lot because this has faced our small businesses and all of our businesses so widely. Can you talk how you would handle, I know the governor's orders, he can do what he wants, but are there steps that you would take to ensure that the businesses can stay open, even if the numbers continue to kind of creep up a little?
Yes, I mean, I would absolutely take every step that I possibly could, including finding out why the decisions were made as they were made by Governor Wolf. I have been talking to, I know the owners of several restaurants and bars in Ardmore and Havertown, and the impact that they've had on those businesses is heartbreaking to me. The John Henry's Pub in Ardmore, good friends of ours own it, and she is, has done everything she can to try to, stay by the code and stay open. And it's terrible to see it happening. I think at this point, that when I see what other states have done, that they are allowing restaurants to open up and they have taken the precautions. There's either plexiglass slides between them. We have been to restaurants where the menus are under plexiglass on the tabletop, so there's no touching. I think everybody has taken steps to make this work. And I think that the restaurants and the businesses, small businesses should be able to open up at full capacity at this point. In the beginning of my campaign, I started walking up and down the small businesses on Darby and Eagle Roads. And it was heartbreaking to hear some of the stories. The lady that owns the Bead Garden, where my daughter had her 10th birthday, probably 12 years ago, she's been in business there for 17 years, and she can't open up because of the size of her business, and she wouldn't be able to do the distancing as required. But it's one of those things where we have to be able to make it work, like with the schools and with sports. Other states are making it work. New York is making it work a little bit better than we are, I believe. And I think that we need to put the guidelines in place so that these businesses can open up full capacity, be back to school, be back to sports. We have to be able to make it work. We shouldn't sit back and wait. We need to take the steps to make it happen now instead of waiting until it's okay to do it.
Christine, thank you so much for being with us this morning. We appreciate your time. And we want to thank all of our participants that logged on, those of you who asked questions, and those of you that are here to educate yourselves to make sure that you're voting for the best candidate for you next Tuesday. We know that this is going to be an unprecedented election and an unprecedented year. So we hope that you all take the time to make informed decisions. If you haven't voted yet, make sure that you know who your candidates are and know why you're voting for them. Again, we appreciate our CPAC board. Ed, thank you again for your time this morning and jumping in when I wasn't able to be here. So thank you, Alex, Ron, Jess, Jacqueline. We truly appreciate you making this all happen and bringing this candidate event in a virtual forum, which is a little bit difficult, a little bit technical, but we truly appreciate everybody's patience and your time with us this morning. So stay educated, stay well, and stay dry today. Thank you.
Thank you.